Second mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Second mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. Good evening. This is a meeting of the Kennebunkport Planning Board, and it's a hybrid meeting via Zoom and in person. Those people who are not in this room, not meeting with us in person, are welcome to join via Zoom. And you'll find the connection and the ID on the town website. We have tonight participating and present in the room, myself and Ed Francis, and Scott. I'm losing it tonight. And Larry and Mike West. George is out of town. Tom is participating via Zoom, and because of that, I've been asked to chair the meeting to make it a little simpler. We have, how many attendees do we have on Zoom?
We have 12 attendees, 13 attendees.
13 attendees, including Tom?
No, not including Tom.
Oh, wow, that's a pretty good crowd. Okay. We have 2 items on the agenda. I want to point out that one of the items, KJ Trudeau Properties, has been postponed. That's the Glennet Goose Rock subdivision, postponed at the request of the applicant. So we will not be taking that up tonight. We will be taking up item 221201 Woodland Drive, and we will be taking up item 221202, the Mills Road subdivision. And with that,
You're going to approve the minutes first?
we're going to do the minutes first, yes. Is that
Okay.
Tom?
Yeah.
Oh, he's going to be chiming in on me, I can just see it. Okay. We have before us the minutes, which are done, and I hope everybody's had a chance to read them. Are there any corrections? No. Any comments? No. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
I'll second that. Okay. And I approve. Ed?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Larry?
Approve.
Mike, you're voting tonight.
Okay, then I approve.
Okay. All right, we have approved the minutes. In that case, we'll take the first item on the agenda, unless you have something else, Tom.
No, I'm good. I missed the previous one, so, I wasn't voting for the approval of minutes for the previous one.
Okay,
So,
well, that's what I figured. That's why I left you out.
yeah,
You've done that before. Okay. Let's then take up Woodland Drive. And this is a final subdivision application, and this is the public hearing. So members of the public, after the applicant basically gives a small summary of the proposal, members of the public are welcome to talk, comment in any way that they want. We'll take them first from people who are in the room. And if you get up to talk, please let us know who you are and where you live. Okay, applicant here?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for being here. My name's Tom Schoening. I'm the attorney for the applicant BCD Woodland LLC. And I'm here in person, and then Duncan McDougall is also here remotely.
Okay.
I can probably give just a quick summary. This is Lot D on an existing subdivision dating back to the 80s, kind of on the peninsula behind Walker's Point there. I call it the High Rent District. This is about a 10-acre lot of land only, and the property owner / applicant is proposing to divide that 10-acre lot into two residential building lots. And we've submitted a full application with the survey and engineering plans, and we're here before the planning board because this is a lot on a town-approved subdivision plan. So when it's any division of a lot on a town-approved subdivision plan, we need your approval to do that division. So in this case, we're just splitting the 10-acre lot into two house lots. Mm-hmm. Duncan, do you have anything to add?
Duncan, are you available?
He is a panelist and his microphone is not muted.
Okay.
Well, do you have any other questions about my summary?
No, I'll add that these two lots, this lot was previously cleared, and it's mostly open area where you plan to build the houses, and that the road coming down that you plan to build is 20 feet wide. And I believe we have an approval from the fire chief for that road. Okay. If there's nothing else from planning board members? Comments? No. Then I'll open up the
Good.
public hearing. Tom?
no, I'm good.
Okay. All right.
And I'll sit down and just hang tight.
Okay. Is there anybody in the room that would like to talk? Please come up to the mic.
Thank you. I'm David Strawn. My family is at 6 and 7 Spring Valley Road. We have a budding lot 8-5-10. I have one comment and 4 questions. The first comment is I take offense with the high rent district point. That's really not funny. I mean, the amount of money we're paying in real estate taxes to keep it in our family is very emotional to us. So keep those comments to yourself. Thank you. My first question is on the application. I know he said it's from a 1980 subdivision, but I think there should have been some other map included in that, because that 1980 map is very misleading. That 1980 map on page 26 doesn't show two roads that have been added, an extension to a third road, and the fact that numerous lots on that map have been divided into multiple lots. So the map from 1980 looks like it's a very sparsely populated, an area that needs to be developed. For example, Lot E on the map has been divided into 3 fully developed lots. The Forester lot into 2 lots. There are others that are 6 lots, 3 lots, 5 lots, 4 lots, 2 lots, 2 lots, all developed with houses in the last 43 years. This map is 43 years old. I don't understand why they use a 43-year-old map to try to display a development in 2023. Is there is there any way I can get an answer to that? Why we don't have a more up-to-date map?
Werner, can you comment on that?
Sure. So what this is a subdividing of a previously approved subdivision. So the requirement for the submission is that they submit the subdivision plan that was approved in 1980 for when this lot was created, and that's the plan. So
Understood, but shouldn't there have been a
excuse me,
follow-up map?
Excuse me, sir, let me finish. So this is the subdivision plan that was approved in 1980, and that's the plan that they're required to submit back to the town. What they do provide is they provide a copy of the tax map showing the lot in question and how it relates to the adjacent properties. So they've met their submission requirement in terms of what they have to provide. They were providing the old plan from 1980 and their subsequent plan showing the proposed revision.
Yeah, but it didn't show a revision on the entire 1980 map. It showed just their lot.
And because those lots were those parcels that were subsequently divided on their own under separate ownership all have their own separate subdivision applications and subdivision lots. So there's no requirement to bring forth all of the subdivision plans of all of those other lots, outside of this.
Well, I just wanted to go on record. It is extremely misleading, therefore. Okay. The second item would be for, I think, Mr. McDougall, on pages 15, 16, 20, and 21 of the application. It doesn't show which direction that the septic systems will leach. I'm assuming they're leaching towards the road. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
On pages 15, 16, 20, and 21, where you draw out the proposed septic systems, the maps, or these designs do not show which direction that the septic tank and the septic systems will leach.
Okay, well, these were drawn by a licensed environmental professional, and they show that where on the lot away from the house the tank goes, and then therefore just behind that would also be the leach field. So on lot 1, it does, yes, kind of at a 22-degree angle from the road away from the house, and the other lot 2 where we are asking for the proposed lot 2, it would, yes, drain straight towards the road. That is correct.
Okay, so on page 15, you're saying it would leach towards where it says 20-degree diameter. I guess diameter is what you're saying there. In that direction towards the road.
22-degree angle from the road. It's on one of the surveys. I don't remember which number page it is. It does have the test pit locations where we found the suitable soils for these. Shows where the potential houses would go and where the leach fields would go.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up question on that. Does that affect the durability of the road when these leaching fields are going to leach towards the roads?
Absolutely not.
Can you explain why?
They aren't close enough to the road to have any effect. You're talking I believe they use 90 gallons per day per bedroom as a flow calculation for the leaching field. And those are what the state and the DEP have deemed adequate to not cause issues like this. And they're gonna be subsurface, so none of this will leak to the road or anywhere near it or undermine anything to do with the road.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question, on page 24 and 25 regarding the width of the road. If I'm reading this correctly, it says that you're planning to have a 40-foot wide road, is that correct?
20-foot wide.
I mean, that's what this map says, 40 feet.
That's the right of way that's deeded to all the properties on this road is 40 feet wide.
Okay, so it's,
The road
so
itself
the answer is
will be
no.
20. The road will be 20 feet wide. The
Okay.
right of way deeded to all these properties is 40.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Finally, the last point really is for you, Werner. This road is, again, linking to South Main Street. South Main Street is a death trap. What is the planning board going to do, and you as head of the planning department, about improving South Main Street? This development will bring at least 6 more cars entering into South Main Street, where that is a 30-degree hill where they're entering. No sidewalks, no curbs, and it's a windy road right there heading down, or unless you're coming up. Last summer, my wife was walking and was almost hit by a car. That happens literally daily in the summer months, between June and September. More and more people are living in that area year-round. Is the town going to do something to improve at least that section of South Main Street? Now that you've allowed Ivy Lane, which is going to be at least 6 cars, 2 houses, 3 cars per, based on the size of the house. This Woodland Road, another 2 houses, 3 cars per. That's a lot of traffic on a very unsafe road. When someone is hit and killed on that road, it's going to come back to this group. Is this group willing to recommend to the town to improve that road with at least a curb or a sidewalk so that people can safely transpire over that area? Starting down by Ivy Lane, all the way to Summit Avenue. That's my question.
So to be clear, I just want to clarify what my role is here. So, my role here as staff is that, I provide staff support here for the planning board. So ultimately, questions that relate to a subdivision application, in regards to questions on traffic and things of that nature, it's in the board's discretion to decide whether or not to request any, additional type of traffic study or things of that nature. Okay, that's not staff's decision. That's up to the board through their subdivision review process to decide whether or not to ask for that type of information. As far as any recommendations or requests for improvements to South Main, I would tell you to direct those questions directly to the Public Works Department and through the town manager's office. It's not typical.
But when this board is approving these developments, they're bringing more traffic to that area that is unsafe to begin with. So this board is approving those developments and those issues. This board has a responsibility to make those recommendations to the Public Works Department.
Not really, if I could interject here. The board's responsibility is to look at the increase in traffic that any application may generate.
Okay?
And we do that. That's part of what the board looks at when subdivisions go in and when lots are divided, any increase in traffic. But in reality, for improvements for South Main Street, we don't really have the authority to tell the town basically that they need to change the road. We can make comments on that, but really, if you want to get changes to South Main Street, I recommend that you go before the Board of Selectmen and start pointing out with your neighbors that the traffic has increased and the road is dangerous, and also to the town manager. That's where most of that concern is best directed, because they have the authority to start making those
But you
changes.
also have the ability to delay development until those types of improvements or safety measures are completed.
We do not delay development. We can turn down an application if we think there is a serious traffic problem.
This has been in your minutes since 2002, when Mr. Goldenfarb tried to do the development where Ivy Lane is now. And it was, this board declined that development because of all of the traffic that was coming in to the bottom of South Main Street and Kings Highway. So there's precedent here for delaying or declining a development because of unsafe traffic patterns.
Yeah, we wouldn't delay development.
Then fine, I'm sorry if I...
We
if
would
that-
deny an
Okay.
application.
Then you have precedent in denying an application because of an extremely unsafe situation.
Yes, we could do
To
that.
be clear, the planning board actually approved that subdivision for Mr. Goldenfarb back in that time frame. Subsequently, it required a certain level of public improvements that had to be done in that right-of-way, which ultimately the Board of Selectmen chose to not approve.
Wasn't it the recommendation of the planning board to the selectmen to deny it?
The planning board ultimately had approved that subdivision.
Okay,
So the planning board had approved that subdivision, but the Board of Selectmen did not allow for the improvements that needed to be done within the public right-of-way. So essentially, it had that effect. There were improvements that were proposed that the Board of Selectmen at the time did not allow to move forward. But ultimately, the planning board had approved the subdivision. Now, it was a very long process, from what I understand. From what I understand, that review went on for many years. It was a fair number of lots. I mean, as I recall, and you could probably tell me more specifically how many lots, were in
9.
that proposal. It was a 9-lot subdivision, so significantly different than, what you have here in front of this board today, which is splitting an existing lot in an existing subdivision.
yeah, and I'm not opposed to the splitting, I'm opposed to the road, that where it connects to a very dangerous road. You're adding more traffic to an already potentially deadly situation. That's the issue. And if this proposal is a part of that contribution, then it should be declined until the road can be improved.
But the Ivy Lot subdivision, basically, as Werner points out, was 9 new lots, if I remember correctly. And what you're dealing with here is the division of 1 lot, which at the most, if you're saying 3 cars per lot, is the most is a 3-car increase.
No, it'll be a 6-car increase. It's gonna be 2 houses.
It's going to be 2 houses, but you've got 1 lot which could already have, which they
There's
could
nothing
build on.
developed-
They
there's
could
nothing
build
developed
on.
now.
They can build it on it right now
Sure.
without planning board approval, and that would be 3 cars.
Right.
What they're asking is to divide the lot, to put another house, and that would be at the most 3 cars.
I understand that, but there's nothing there now, so they're not gonna develop anything right now until they
But
split
it's
this
not,
lot.
it's not up to us to decide whether anybody can build on a lot, as it is now.
I understand.
They can go to Werner and get that approval at any time when
I
they meet the
understand, but the
requirements.
proposal is for a splitting of the lot and building, and then subsequently building 2 homes, which are sizable homes, each will, I'm sure, have at least 3 cars related to it. I'm looking at the whole picture.
I know you're looking at the whole
you're-
picture,
you're-
but I'm
you're-
looking at what the planning board has to look
I
at.
understand, but the planning board has to look at the long-term impacts of what they're approving.
And they do. Yeah, I think so. Is there more you wanted to bring up?
No, I appreciate your time, and I hope you'll see my point.
Yes. Is there anybody else at the meeting who would like to speak? Okay. Do we have Zoom attendees who would like to speak?
We have 20 attendees, no hands are raised.
Okay. Did you want to make a comment to that?
I'm just gonna respond briefly. Sorry about the joke. I live in Kennebunk, and I know this area well, and it's a beautiful area. I was married at the Colony. We walk around this area a lot. It's beautiful. I just want to say, I mean, you know this. I'm going to be quick. You know, this is just a lot split approval. This is not a full subdivision approval, and based on the plans and the road plans we've submitted, this lot split meets all town lot parameters, and we're building a road to the town road standards for even a higher standard than is just needed for this lot.
Can you just clarify for me? My understanding is that the road existed prior to this application, that you're improving the road. You're not building the road.
That is correct. We are, the road was paved for about 500 feet at 16 feet wide. Now we are improving the remaining 1,200 feet and that 500 feet to a total width of 20 foot wide to the town standards and the fire chiefs. As you've seen in those letters, the approval for the turnaround at the end and the width of the road, et cetera.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing to the statement about the road? This road was originally the fire road, which was a way of getting fire trucks from the town out to the Walker's Point and that area quicker. And that was that way up until the 1980s, when somebody bought the land on the Bush side and put up a fence. That road has not been used by anyone other than people going back there to do who knows what in over 30 years. It was, like you said, there's slightly paved at the front end, but that has not been a usable road. The road is so, is dirt and it's so rutted and what have you, it's impassable except by foot and by bicycle.
I will tell you that the board did a site walk
Okay.
some months ago now, and we are familiar with the state of the road. I think you're characterizing a previous state of the road. It was in fact paved about a third of the way, and the rest of it was unpaved. There perhaps was some ruts in it, but not prohibitively so.
Well, it's been improved by these folks as they've started last summer, yeah.
I understand. My only point is that the application here is to put one additional lot into this subdivision, and that's why it's before us. In the course of doing that, we've worked with the applicant to make sure that the road is improved to the point where it meets the standards that are required for the number of homes that are potentially will be put in there. We will not have a say over when and how many cars the additional lots that are already approved on that road will carry. Those are in fact a burden on South Main that's pre-approved. What we're talking about here is adding one more home to that approved list.
And more cars onto South Main Street.
Thank you.
There's still nobody out there who wants to make a comment?
No hands raised.
Okay. If that's the case, then I'll close the public hearing. And I believe that Tom has said that he hasn't quite finished any findings of fact yet. But we need to approve or disapprove this application. Planning board discussion? More discussion? No?
No.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
So I move to approve the application.
I second it.
Okay. Ed?
I approve it.
I approve.
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 Tom?
Muted.
said it louder, you know.
Yes,
Yeah, I approved.
Hand gestures.
okay. In that case, the application is approved, and, let me see. That's a final subdivision application, and Tom is going to write up the findings of fact, and we'll have them in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'll read them on the March 1st meeting,
Right,
and then we'll sign them off, and then all that has to happen is someone has to pick them up after they're signed from April and put them into the the registry of deeds.
right. The applicant does not need to be here for the reading of the findings of fact. Okay,
Nor his lawyer. Nobody needs, you guys don't need to show up for the March 1st meeting.
okay, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Just one other point, that we do need a plan with a signature block.
So
Yes.
that's what I was gonna just touch base on the next proceeding. So after the findings of fact are read at the next meeting, the applicant will submit the plans, whatever Mylar, like, and we'll make an
Yep.
appointment to get those signed.
Yeah, those can be, those can be brought to the town hall.
So we can do that through email, figure that out.
That's right.
Great.
Yep, we
All
can
right,
do
thanks so
that.
much.
And then-
And that's, just to be clear, those don't have to be done in series, do they? Does the findings have to be done prior to the Mylars? Or can he start on the?
No, I mean,
Submit
I'd prefer to have the findings,
You would.
finalized first.
Okay.
And then the plans.
That's what I wanted to
from there,
clarify.
but-
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll work with Leon at the Lower Village Survey to get the signature block
Okay,
for you, and I'll get them to you guys.
okay. So, that being done, the next item on the agenda is the Mills Road subdivision. And this is a preliminary subdivision application and the public hearing. And you can go ahead and summarize.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Mike Tatama Wieland. I'm a civil engineer with Teradyne Consultants. I'm here with Pat Dooling, who is the applicant, and as well as Jeff Bowley, who is, you probably all know from other developments in town. Jeff is acting as a consultant on this project with Pat. We were here 2 weeks ago and briefly described the project and had a short discussion. I'll give you a quick rundown again, just for those maybe who are on the Zoom who weren't here. This is a 75-acre site located at 262 Mills Road, entirely wooded today, pockets of wetlands, several vernal pools, and the proposal is for a 13-lot subdivision accessed by a new proposed dead-end road. The dead-end road's approximately 1,400 linear feet. Depending on how you measure it, that measurement would be to the center of the cul-de-sac. The zoning is primarily free enterprise district. The area within 500 feet of Mills Road is the Goose Rocks district. Net residential density on this parcel indicates that it could be developed with up to 53 lots. Again, this proposal is for a 13-lot subdivision. All the lots will be served by individual wells and septic systems. One new piece of information that I do have relates to the fire chief's input related to the length of the dead-end road. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, because the road exceeds 1,000 linear feet, that'll require a waiver. And the fire chief, I just got an email forwarded to me from Werner late this afternoon from the fire chief, who indicated it correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sort of paraphrasing here, Werner, but not concerned as long as the lots are as long as new homes on the lots contain a sprinkler system. So.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah, so we're working with Jay on his, on the memo that'll come to the board. But that's essentially, the gist. We discussed some other options. Your subregs also provide for a cistern option. Due to our experience in town with that, we're generally not in favor of that as an alternative. For fire suppression purposes, but yeah, Jay indicated that, he was satisfied with the road length, given the fact that the homes will be protected with 13Ds.
13D sprinkler systems, that's a sprinkler system in every room in the house or just in, I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's what's referred to as a life safety system, so it's not one of these systems that necessarily, it's not like your typical where you've got, standpipe on the outside of the building, the truck pulls up, hooks up to it. They're typically a self-contained system that they're sized based on the size of the house to provide a certain number of minutes of suppression to basically allow for occupants to get out of the house. So it's not a, like I said, it's life safety. It's not we're protecting the building here. It's more, gives additional time for occupants to exit.
So would it be attached to the well, the public system, or is it self-contained?
Well, I mean, it's, whenever you have homes that are on, private, water supply systems, so on wells, typically there's storage tanks, that wind up being part of that system so that, there's adequate supply if there's not enough, well pressure. So, but it's something that gets a permit through the state fire marshal's office issues, the permit for each one of those individual systems for each house. So it's, they're done by contractors that are licensed to install those systems.
Thank you.
Yep.
So basically, it's a system whereby you get people out of the house, and the pets maybe, and you let the house burn down.
Yep.
Hopefully,
Slowly.
by that time, the fire department has managed to get there and keep the forest from burning down.
Yeah, correct. I
Okay.
think, don't quote me directly on this, but I want to say there's somewhere, it provides, I think, less than 10 minutes worth of, supply that, that goes into the house based on the size. So,
Slow burn. A slower burn,
right,
yes.
that's right, yeah.
Okay.
So we're here tonight, looking forward to hearing from any members of the public who wish to speak, as well as answer any questions the board might have. So thanks for
Okay.
listening.
The other waiver was about slopes, I believe. They were looking for 2 waivers, I believe.
That's correct.
Side
So
slope.
the
You want me to
slopes where you
summarize that
cross.
again?
Yeah, so there was the waiver around the dead-end road run, and then there was another request for a waiver around the slopes where you cross the
Wetlands.
wetlands.
Yeah, exactly. So again, where this road does cross wetlands, we're asking to be allowed to increase the side slope of the road from the standard is 3 to 1, so 3 horizontal feet for every 1 vertical feet. Steepen that up to 2 to 1 because it minimizes or reduces the amount of wetland impact. It essentially reduces the footprint of the road, and so reduces wetland impacts.
Is the road more likely to degrade faster that way?
No, I don't think so. 3 to 1 is kind of a typical. It's a slope that's easy to vegetate and stabilize. Once you get a little steeper than that, you have to take a little more care. So in that case, what we do is we specify an erosion control fabric be placed in those areas, which stabilizes the soil until grass can be established.
Okay. All right. Are there more questions?
Can you
from the board?
remind us, is this a 20-foot road and is it paved?
This is a paved road. It's slightly wider than 20 feet, so it meets the minor road standard. The travel lanes are 20 feet.
The paved surface is,
The
Oh.
paved surface is a little more
I see.
than 20 feet. The travel lanes are 20 feet. There's a curb and sidewalk on one side,
yes.
and so the lane with the curb and sidewalk is actually 11 feet, so it's, technically a 10-foot travel lane, a 1-foot shoulder, you can consider it that, and then a curb. And on the side without a sidewalk, it's a 10-foot paved surface and a 3-foot wide gravel shoulder. So in total, the paved width would be 21 feet.
More questions from the board? No, if there aren't any, then I'll open the public hearing.
Thank you.
Those people that are present, someone would like to speak?
Thank you. Chris D'Angelo's, Kennebunkport resident. I have some comments to make about this project, and I have concerns. I will be forthright and tell you that I'm opposed to it as it's presented. But I first have a question. Last week, we were told that the road would be 1,650 feet, and in fact, that's in their application. And we were just told it's 1,400 feet.
Which
That was
is
the question.
correct.
Yeah. So last week you told it was 1,650, that's in their application, and now we're told it's 1,400.
Yeah, so road lengths are measured in a couple different ways. If you were to follow the center line from where this proposed road starts at Mills Road, follow it down all the way around the cul-de-sac, it's about 1,650 feet. The way we typically measure a dead-end road length for the purposes of calculating, maximum dead-end road length standard is to the center of the cul-de-sac. Because you're essentially, you're counting going around in a circle at the end, which is in really so you're actually going back towards the start of the road. That 1,650 feet includes the length
loop.
that's going back towards the start of the road.
It includes the complete loop.
Exactly, yep.
Or what would it be to the very end of that cul-de-sac linear? Not the circle, but start to finish, what would it be? Just curious.
Yeah, I would guess 1,500, ballpark.
Okay. So, like 2 weeks ago, is it Tadema? I'm sorry, Mr. Tadema, okay, I'll have to see the Terradin representative. Like then, tonight, he referenced it's a 75-acre lot, and they could hold 75 acres, they could hold 53 lots. At the prior meeting, he first said 49, he corrected to 53. But in his own words, and we know this because it's recorded like now, he ended by saying, clearly the nature of this lot would make that impossible. So I think it's misleading to come up here and tell the board and the residents of Kennebunkport that they can get 53 lots on this parcel, but we really can't. And they, in fact, can't even get to 13 unless you, the board, grants them a variance of 50%. It was 1,650 feet last meeting. Now they're saying 1,500 feet. So you still they're looking for a 50% variance on top of the 1,000 feet afforded by code. I'm right on that, right? Okay. So clearly the nature of this lot would make that impossible. So they're, I presume, trying to put in a best light that 13 is a lot better than 53 and make it more appealing to grant them their variance. And that's the problem. Another 500 feet of road, which is really unnecessary to do a project here, that I think will have be a significant threat and result in unnecessary wildlife habitat destruction. I am in agreement. He described this parcel as having a lot going on with respect to natural resources. There are significant vernal pools. There are a lot of vernal pools, not just a few. Wetlands throughout the entire parcel, and it hosts significant wildlife habitat. I felt that it was emphasized that most of it was occurring in the northwest corner, but in fact, if you look at it, it's throughout this whole parcel. It's in the southwest, the southeast, and right along Mills Road. Right along Mills Road. So you can see where all the wetlands are. It's throughout this whole parcel. And they referenced that an endangered species was found, a spotted turtle on the parcel, and again, it was several times mentioned it was the northwest corner. But I didn't hear anybody mention, and to be fair to them, it's in their application, that an additional endangered species was found, in fact, 2 ribbon snakes. If you go to the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife webpage, you will find that spotted turtles, in fact, can travel up to 1.7 miles in a year in search of food and for breeding. And their aquatic habitat includes slow streams, wet meadows, bogs, ponds, vernal pools, swamps, exactly what's throughout this whole parcel. And in fact, interestingly, this spotted turtle was first discovered or captured 18 years ago, 1,100 meters away. And it's been traveling all around ever since. And they have a turtle database. Excuse me. I'm a little nervous. I'm not used to this. They have a turtle database. And in their report that they submitted, it was stated that we know spotted turtles use a variety of upland and wetland habitats. And we can be reasonably certain that this turtle did not move in a straight line from its originally documented location in 2003 to where it was observed in 21. Likely transverse a much greater portion of area between these 2 locations and perhaps well beyond them over the last 18 years, probably utilize a variety of wetlands and upland habitat along the way, all of which is on this property. So we have 2 endangered species, a lot of wildlife habitat, which brings me to the road. And they were asking for a 65% variance, and now I guess it's down to 50, which I still think is significant. And when they talked about their justification for this road, they stated that they were unable to connect to any other roads, and that because of the frontage on Mills Road, it was impractical to create a loop road. And in their application, they stated, they commented on 1 road is better than 2 roads. 1 road is better than 2 roads, which, may or may not be true, but they can't get 2 roads. And they've admitted that. They can't connect to any other roads. They have to have a loop road. And they said in order to develop the parcel and limit wetland impacts associated with road construction, they need a 1,650-foot dead-end road. If multiple roads were to be constructed to meet this guideline, it would result in significant additional impact to freshwater wetlands and habitat associated with significant vernal pools. Okay. And in his own words, he said, we are stuck with a dead-end road, and to minimize impact for development, we need a 1,650-foot road. Well, they're really not stuck with anything. These are seasoned professionals, skilled. It's not their first development rodeo, so they had to have known what they were getting into just by looking at the map. And so they should have known that they had to have a loop road to begin with. And if they are stuck, it's really their responsibility. They need to take ownership. It's not the planning board's responsibility to get them unstuck. But they're not stuck with anything. And again, part of that statement, he said that to minimize impact for development, we need a 1,650-foot road. At that time, 650, above the 1,000-foot by code. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me, because I think it should be the other way around. To minimize environmental impact, you want a shorter road, not a longer road. A longer road means habitat, 650 feet or 500, turned into asphalt, turned into sidewalks, into development. So it really doesn't make any sense, and I think it's misleading and maybe disingenuous to say that to minimize impact for development, we need a 1,650-foot road.
Is the point you're trying to make that you would not approve the length of the road because it has too much environmental impact, and you say they should have a loop road?
No, they said they needed a loop road. It's not my words, it's in their,
Okay.
in the minutes. They
Okay,
said,
but your point is that the waiver shouldn't be granted because it has too much environmental impact, just the road itself?
not necessarily.
Okay,
But they said they couldn't have a loop road. They needed a dead-end road because they could not do a loop road.
I understand that, okay.
Okay. So, and it was noted at the last meeting that in addition to this road, there was going to be very long driveways at the end of the road. So you have to take in consideration not just the extra road they want above code, but the additional roads that will be extending out into this wetlands, into this habitat. You asked them if they were going to have any plans to further develop this property, and they said, or you were going to restrict further development, and the answer was no, and that they couldn't do that. I'm not an attorney, but maybe a second opinion is warranted here. But you know, you're really letting the foxes in the hen house by giving them this additional 50%, because that could open up for future development down the road. They can come back and try to develop the 7 acres that would be at the end of it. So it really opens up for more development, for more wildlife habitat destruction. And, they referenced several times, and I'm wrapping this up, that they were avoiding impact to the extent they could. And I find that disingenuous, because if they really were avoiding impact to the habitat, they wouldn't ask for additional road that isn't necessary to do a project there. I mentioned that they're not stuck with anything. They're not. They can withdraw this application and come back with one that respects the code, respects this environment, this ecosystem, and limit their road to 1,000 feet.
Are you also suggesting then that they would limit, by doing that, they would limit the lot development?
Well, I don't know. My point is, I think the two go hand in hand, so probably, I don't know if they're gonna be able to get, as I said before, they probably can't get 13 lots unless you give them the variance. So, but they can do a development, they just may not be able to do as many as they want with a road that conforms to code. I'll close by just expressing that we're losing valuable habitat at an alarming rate. And they don't need the extra road length to do a project, and I respectfully encourage the board to deny this application. Thank you.
Are there any people on Zoom with their hands raised?
Yes, we have Matthew and
Okay.
You can speak.
Would you identify yourself, please?
You have to unmute yourself, however, Matthew. Matthew, you have to unmute yourself so that we can hear you. All right. Alan had his hand raised, but no longer has it raised. Alan, do you wish to speak? If so, raise your hand. Matthew has disappeared. We currently have no one with a hand raised.
Okay,
Oh, now we have Jacqueline with her hand raised.
okay.
Jacqueline, you can speak when you unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted?
Now we hear you.
Okay, I just had a couple of questions.
Would you give your full name, please?
My name is Jacqueline Lyons.
Okay,
I'm a summer resident at 272 Mills Road, and I just had 3 questions. Is this going to be a seasonal or a year-round development?
I believe it's year-round.
Okay, and do you have any more information on the building details, like the size of the units, the square footage? Are there going to be basements? Are there going to be multiple stories? How many bedrooms, bathrooms, that kind of information?
No, these homes have not been designed yet.
Okay, and my last question is, do you anticipate that you're going to need any blasting to do anything for your water lines and your septic?
Can you answer that?
The answer is we don't know yet. There is evidence of shallow bedrock out there, which may need to be removed. The methods of removal could be, sometimes you can, depending on the nature of the rock, sometimes it can be removed with an excavator. Sometimes it can be what they call hammered and then removed, and sort of one of the last resorts would be blasting. So potentially it could need to be done, but we just don't know yet.
And if you did, you would have to conform with the town's blasting code, correct?
Absolutely, yeah, which there would be a,
I'm anticipating the concern that the person is.
of course, yeah.
Okay, so we would be notified.
Oh, yes.
Depending on where you are, certainly the town would be involved in that.
That's
Yeah, I'm
correct.
gonna-
Yeah, we require blast notifications for folks who are, if you're within 500 feet of the blast radius of where that's located, the town ensures that certified mailings have been sent to those affected property owners.
Okay, thank you. My last question was about the traffic and egress, but I learned from your previous public hearing that that's a different department, so that was my last question, and it's probably not appropriate for the planning board.
Okay. There is a traffic study that's been done, I believe.
Yeah, and just to be clear, for this development here, because it has an entrance that comes out onto a state aid road, so it comes out onto Route 9, that's going to require a permit that is issued by the Department of Transportation. So it actually falls under the jurisdiction of Maine DOT as far as, the entrance is concerned.
Great, thank you, Lorna.
Okay. Do we have any other hands?
Have Matthew again.
Okay.
Matthew?
Hey, sorry about that earlier.
Go ahead, we
Can
can
you hear
hear
me?
you. Matthew, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. My question, I'm at 236 Mills Road. I'm going to be one of the abutters to the road that's going in off of Route 9. So I guess I had two question and a comment. My question was, How far in are the houses? I got a map. It didn't have any delineation as far as house lots was. I wondered how far down the road were the houses going to start to be built? And how close to my sideline the road was going to be.
I don't think they've decided yet where those houses are going to go. Matthew, could you give your full name for the record, please?
Yep, it's Matthew Aiken.
Thank you.
But you have a map where the house lots are defined, correct, Matthew?
No, I don't. I got a map that just had,
Yeah.
the abutters and within the 200 feet of, having to be notified.
Yeah, we're looking at a sketch here in the room that's got the lots delineated in their sizes, and I think the answer to your question, I'm not quite sure how to make that available to you.
But it's available all in the planning board section, right?
Yeah, Matt, if you go on the town's website, and look under, boards and committees, and go to the planning board, section. There's a section where we have active planning board applications. And within that, you'll find, all the plans and information for this proposed subdivision, which does include, the plan that shows your lot, and its relationship to, where the road is, and where adjacent lots may be located.
What's a typical setback for a sideline for a developed road?
So, the setbacks, they have, they meet the same zoning requirements that you do, in terms of, 15-foot sides and rears, for property line setbacks, 20-foot setback, to the front is what's on their proposed. So, same setbacks that, that apply to your property.
Even for a development road?
Well, the development road, is your question, how far does a development road have to be from an abutting property?
Yeah, I mean, can they put the road 30 feet from my house? Is I guess my question.
So the road, itself, has to fall within the center line of the right of way. So there's not a specific setback, specifically for that road. So, I mean, in theory, you could have a 50-foot wide right of way that runs up a property line, and the road would be in the center of that. But I would encourage you to look at the plan that's on, that's on the site so that you can see what's proposed.
And sometimes on those maps, you cannot see the whole map, but there'll be a copy down in the planning board office in the town hall.
Where is this gentleman's lot?
I am 236. I am, I guess, I don't know if I'm west of the entrance where the road would be.
So if his concern is how close is the new road to his lot, can you just speak to that in general terms? I don't think it's
Sure.
an
So,
impact, but.
so the road, the proposed road, well, I guess what I'll say, it appears to me, based on the plan I have, which does show Mr. Aiken's lot, adjacent to his lot is a proposed lot. So, and there's another proposed residential lot. It's lot 13. And then on the other side of lot 13 would be the proposed road. So essentially, I believe their backyards would be up against each other.
Is that helpful? And again, I think when you look at what's on site, I think it'll bring some clarity to what's being proposed.
Yeah, I just didn't know if the road had to be so long before they could start to put houses on it. I thought it had to go so far in or whatever.
No, I think it's just the setback from Route 9 would be the limiter. How close do you want to put your house to Mills Road?
Right. And I guess my only comment was, you know, I've seen everything from bears to cottontail rabbits out back. Every bit of wildlife you could possibly imagine. It's one of the most pristine pieces of wildlife refuges I've ever seen in this town. I really hope that when they develop it, that they take that into account, because it's you know, I actually hope that the Conservation Trust would have bought it. I can't imagine why they wouldn't have, but it is honestly one of the most beautiful pieces of land, and it's kind of sad it's developed.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else out there?
We have Alan Fijal. Apologies for the pronunciation of your name. You can speak, Alan. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, it took me a little while to figure out. I had to get my son to help me understand how to unmute myself. So thank you for your time. I haven't seen a good map of the subdivision. The one that we got sent to us was too confusing to me. I couldn't figure out where the Goose Rocks was, where this development was going in. And I guess I understand what you're saying. I have to go onto the town webpage to get a better look at it. So I guess I would do that. But I did notice that the map was there, and I didn't know if you were able to at all put it up in a place where, you know, it was visible to you know, people like me. So that's my first question. And then my second question is, who owns this land now?
It is the applicant who owns it.
The applicant owns it. They are Fang Farms LLC.
Oh, okay, so they own the property already, I see. So they're not buying it from anybody, it's theirs now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Is there any way you could lift that picture up, that map that you have right there, and
Yeah.
so we could
You know,
maybe
I can,
explain a little better to me?
I can do a share screen of
Yeah, why
the
don't you do that?
plan, so
Getting fancy.
if the host will allow me.
By the way, my address is 272 Mills Road, Unit 5G.
There you go, Warren.
Okay, so folks should be able to see that now.
Okay. Yes, I can, thank you.
And just, you know, for,
So could you point out where Goose Rocks is right
Yep.
now?
yeah, so resort at Goose Rocks is, you know, is further up here. So right, you know, this square parcel here, you know, this is the cell tower location.
Yes,
And so resort
And Mills Road.
is up
Werner,
over,
is a-
is up
is a
over
good-
here.
Mills Road is a good demarc too, if they can put themselves on Route 9.
Correct.
Where
Yep.
is, where is that on this map?
So there's another property between, you know, between resort at Goose Rocks, you know, so you have the, what I'll refer to as the, you know, the Spang Homestead lot. Then there's another, you know, there's another vacant parcel, well, partially vacant parcel. And then you have resort at Goose Rocks.
okay. Where's the road that goes down to the beach?
Dyke Road.
By the clock farm, I think it's called.
So
Dyke
let
Road.
me, I'm
That's Dyke Road.
gonna stop the share on this and pull up another.
Slightly farther along.
Bear with me here. Okay, so
Here we go.
Oh, this
so
is,
so that's the subject property, you know, what's highlighted in yellow.
okay.
And here's resort at Goose Rocks.
Oh, I see.
So that's 272, and then
Okay, that's the road.
Dyke Road
Yeah.
is over here.
Okay. So where's Goose Rocks again?
So
Lower
Resort
right
at
corner.
Goose Rocks is the yellow highlighted parcel.
Okay,
Here's Route 9
yes,
in the intersection with Dyke Road.
yes,
And here's the
that's the parcel
That's the
there.
parcel.
Okay. Okay, and that 2558B, that triangular shaped thing is the cell tower.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
And, okay, I guess I didn't realize, these locations that well from the map I got, so I appreciate you explaining that. And, I guess at this point, I don't have any further questions.
Okay. Do we have anybody else out there?
There are no other hands raised. Oh, now we have Matthew with his hand up again.
Okay.
Just another question about my sideline. I thought he had said something about, there's a lot delineated there on the side, and on that map between my sideline and the road, I can't see anything that would distinguish a lot has been carved out.
All right. Let me reshare that. All right, so Matt, this is your lot right here,
Yep.
and here's the proposed lot 13. Your house, I think, sits somewhere over in here. And then there's
No, I'm tucked against the back line.
yeah, and then
I'm probably 15 feet from the back line.
I hope you're 15 feet from the back line.
Yeah,
If we can get a dozer and
that's
move it.
right.
And then there's a parcel of open space that's adjacent to you, and then there's a lot that's directly behind your lot,
And then the road.
and then there's the road.
Also, be another lot. And it says 0.6. Are these lots not having to meet the 1 acre minimum requirement?
So because of the amount of land that's being put into open space, so they offset upland into open space. And because they're doing that, this is considered a cluster subdivision. And so by doing so, they're able to have lots that are less than the minimum lot size, in the zone. So they still have to meet the requirements for your subsurface waste rules, which is a minimum 20,000 square feet. But again, because of the cluster provisions in the subdivision regs and the land use ordinance, they're able to offset. If they offset additional land into open space, they're able to propose smaller lots.
All right, so it looks like I'll have a close neighbor, but I will enjoy some open space to my front.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm seeing?
Correct.
Okay, I didn't see that when I zoomed in before. For some reason, I'm not sure if I saw a different map. Okay, that's all.
Okay. Other hands?
No more hands.
So
If-
what is the status of the peer review?
So the peer, the plans have been submitted to Acorn. expect that we should have those, you know, the comments back by the 22nd, I believe, is what we have, is what I'd set as a deadline for them. And so that would put us, so if we receive those by the 22nd, you know, those would be available for your meeting on the 1st.
Okay.
But-
So in that case, if everybody's done, we should probably continue the public hearing till the 1st.
That would be a good idea. I'd like to hear any more comments from the board, if there are any.
I have just a couple of questions about the road. So I think the right-of-way's got to be 50 feet, is that correct, Werner, for this right-of-way?
Correct.
So my question really would be, or my request would be, well, sorry, is the route of the road there, is that the whole right-of-way, or is that just the 21-foot paved area?
What's shown on this plan is the right-of-way, so that's a 50-foot.
Okay, that's 50
width.
feet.
Yeah.
Great, okay.
So there will be a bit more buffer
Yeah.
with the road.
So are there any concerns about having the roadway in the middle of the right-of-way? You're just going to go right down the middle?
Correct.
Okay, great, that does it. Thank you.
I have a question. As I said before, this is a very sensitive area, and you've talked about your desire to have a large lot at the end of that cul-de-sac. But I'm wondering if you can't reduce that and still take your 3 lots without making a very large lot there and providing more open space. Something to consider.
Sure.
And I recognize that all along coastal areas, more and more wildlife areas being taken up, and it's very, very important areas, all shoreline areas. Of course, Werner has heard me say many times I wouldn't let people live within 2 or 3 miles of a coastline. It would all be open space. But since this is a centuries-old community and that isn't going to happen, it's best we conserve as much as we possibly can. I was reading in the news recently, they mentioned that 65% of the world's wetlands are now gone. And that's serious, because that's a carbon sink that's gone. It's a carbon source for the ocean that's gone when you have the wetlands along the shore. And of course, it's wildlife habitat. So you might consider perhaps reducing that large lot a bit and making your 3 lots still. But I know that that probably takes away some of your profit, because large lots sell for a lot of money. But
And if I may, I agree with you wholeheartedly on the wildlife habitat and open space. This is a sensitive parcel. I've made no secret about that here.
Right.
There's the applicant very early on in the process consulted with Inland Fisheries and Wildlife and hired a specialist on spotted turtles and had a spotted turtle study done. This will go to, this project still needs to go to the Department of Environmental Protection for a permit. And during that process, IF&W will continue to weigh in on it and to review it for just the things you're talking about, which is habitat for all species, you know, not just endangered species. This is a 75-acre parcel. 55 acres will be preserved as open space. There's about 15 acres of wetland on this parcel, and the vast majority of that is going to remain undisturbed, including the areas of wetland. There's minimal areas of wetland on lots here, and even those areas that are on lots will remain undisturbed. Those are not proposed to be disturbed. And if they do, it needs to be permitted. It needs to go through the permitting process with the state and the federal government. So,
Well, you say that, but human beings are human beings. And little kids like to run through pools. So,
that's true, I guess. So that's all I have.
okay.
Can I make one more comment?
Our public hearing is still open, so, yes,
We have one more hand raised.
okay.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, my biggest objection is to the variance that they're requesting, because it's unnecessary to do a project here. In a perfect world, a land trust would have purchased this, or if I had hit the Powerball, I would have purchased it, but that hasn't happened yet. But they can do a project without the extra road, which I still think is adding to the destruction, to the habitat. It's unnecessary. They may have fewer lots. I don't know. Maybe they'll have smaller lots and sell 13 as well. I don't know. But that's not the point. The point is they should not be getting a 50% variance over a 1,000-foot road, which is code. Thank you.
The Warner?
Yeah, just to be clear on that, this isn't a variance, so it's a
waiver.
It's a waiver request, within the subdivision regs. So, I mean, variance versus waiver are significantly different in terms of, what those are. Variance is if you're is typically based on, I mean, it's a pretty strict standard to get a variance from something out of the land use ordinance. This is a waiver request from the subdivision regulations, which doesn't carry that same weight. And to be fair, I think pretty much every subdivision that we've had, that's come before this board over the many years, have made similar requests that the board has granted.
50%? I mean,
Yeah, we've
that
had
much
some pretty
more
long
road.
ones.
Well,
but-
the importance of the waiver depends really a lot on the ability of the fire department to reach the houses. And that's what we consider probably most important when we're looking at a waiver.
Okay, I didn't understand the difference between a waiver and a
Yeah.
variance, but.
A variance would probably go before the Board of Appeals, zoning Board of Appeals.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, but a
So they just
waiver,
need a waiver for the extra 500 feet or 650 feet.
Correct.
yeah.
Correct, and that's primarily, so, folks often ask, what's the kind of genesis of a 1,000-foot road length, and it's my understanding that that's, typically 1,000 feet has been what your typical fire truck had usually held on it in terms of hose length, and that's the reason, why that, standard was typically put into a subdivision reg, has been based on hose length issues, which is why whenever you ask for input on road length limitations, you reach out to the fire department.
But in this case, the truck's not gonna have to be down on Route 9. The road's wide enough and with the turnaround that the fire truck can make it all the way up to the turnaround.
Yeah,
And
and
so the genesis of the 1,000 feet is more really at this point a driveway issue. Do they got enough hose to get down the driveway to the house?
yeah, it would also be if you were dealing with a subdivision where you had hydrants. If you had hydrants proposed, you would take that into consideration. So if you didn't have 13Ds, if you were looking at house locations that were in excess of 1,000 feet from the hydrant, then that would be something that that the chief would be weighing in on. Just because of that type of limitation. You start adding, getting houses beyond 1,000 from a hydrant location, now you're really looking at, you're not looking at hooking to a hydrant, you're looking at, pump truck, additional apparatus. And some communities don't have that, they don't have that type of, infrastructure. They don't have, those types of vehicles, which is why for some communities, that's a bigger, it's a bigger deal. But just some background info on that.
Then,
May I add one thing? Sorry, go
For my own, just clarity, I know this is free enterprise zone and Goose Rocks. Is Goose Rocks fall under shoreline and resource protection? Or is that different?
Not all of it.
No, so so your shoreland zone and resource protection are overlay zones that are driven by their proximity to the coast, and whether or not any of those areas are, either within coastal floodplains or there's a whole list of other criteria.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if this the bit right up to Route 9 was falling in Goose Rocks. Did Goose Rocks fall under the description of shoreline?
Portions of Goose Rocks are in the shoreland zone. This particular portion is not.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, because I know there were some additional requirements there.
That's
I
right.
just didn't know if this fell into those, so it doesn't, so that's good.
Correct.
So 24-10-10, or whatever it is, it doesn't fall in.
Yeah, just add one thing. So when you have a parcel that, similar to this one, where we do have constraints, where we have wetlands, we have vernal pools, the cluster provisions in the subdivision allow great flexibility in order to avoid those natural resource areas and minimize any impacts you can. And the way I look at this waiver from the dead end road length is very similar. So the proposed subdivision, we've done everything we can in order to again, avoid the sensitive areas, minimize wetland impacts. The alternative is a traditional subdivision where there is a loop road. And could it be done? Yes, it could be done. Is it practical? No, because it would go right through some of those wetland areas and sensitive areas. And if they were 40,000 square foot lots or greater, of course there would be many more wetland impacts and impacts within the areas that are habitat for the sensitive species. So again, the cluster provisions, hand in hand with the waiver for dead end road length, we think results in the best situation for a parcel like this, which is frankly, it's a modest development on a 75 acre parcel with 55 acres of preserved open space.
Oh,
So that's the way we look at it. Thanks.
May I ask? I just have a curiosity. It's a technical question, really. I know you said you're going to put in some street lighting. I assume that the HOA will pay for that, and that will be assessed back to the homeowners?
Correct.
How do they do that? Is it, you put in a box that's got a separate meter in it, and
Correct. Yeah, there will be a separate meter, and
so
it'll be
until
billed to the homeowners
the
association.
homes are also, some portion of the homes are sold,
The developer.
the developer will hold that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have someone in the audience.
Yeah, Jane Millard has her hand up. Jane, you can speak once you unmute yourself.
Thank you. Jane Millard, I'm owner of 293 Goose Rocks. And I'm just curious, when you referred to the undeveloped portion of the property as being dedicated open space, is that an official designation, or is this something you're giving to the Conservation Trust? Or is this just a term, open space, which is essentially just undeveloped property?
So open space, when it goes through a subdivision process, winds up being restricted from any further development. So developers have the choice, under the subdivision regs, they can, Conservation Trust can own the open space, town can own the open space, homeowners association can own the open space, but the takeaway is that it's essentially, it's a condition of the approval of the subdivision that the open space remain undeveloped.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just, if I recall correctly, we talked about last time a draft of the homeowners agreement capturing some type of restriction with respect to recreational use, and
That's in the works right now.
Yeah.
We'll have that for you.
thank you.
Are there others who wish to speak?
There are no other hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. Any other members of the planning board? No? Okay. Then, I think at this point,
Do you need a motion to continue?
I think it's just a motion to continue the public hearing. We're not going to.
Would move to
approve.
continue the public hearing until the next meeting.
Okay, I'll second that.
When we expect to have the input
Acorn
back from
report.
Acorn on the water runoff.
Okay, I'll second that. You're in favor?
Yes, please.
I'm in favor?
In favor?
In favor?
In favor.
Okay.
Favor.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other business?
Other business.
Is there other business?
Our other business as listed on the agenda is to discuss draft ordinance amendments for the June 23 warrant.
Yeah, so that's if the board, if the board wants to have a discussion on those, I'm happy to talk about those. I know folks, have expressed interest in wanting to know, what ordinance amendments, the planning and codes is proposing. And so, to that end, provided you all with, these are just a draft, amendments. And so there's, I can discuss a little bit about, reasons why, some of these are being proposed.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if you'd like.
Can you remind
Yeah.
us of what the first one was? I read them all and was only, I don't remember what the first one was, but I remember thinking, I'd like to talk about that one.
Sure.
Resource protection zone.
Yeah, all right.
Correct.
So I'll grab, that's the first one.
So you had, somebody had a reason for drafting this
That's right,
change.
yeah. So,
What's going on?
so the first one is this proposed revision to the description of resource protection. And so what is driving this in particular, is our new flood maps, that will, dare I say, be coming finally this year. But what you wind up having is that, and I'll use the area that I see impacted the most is the Goose Rocks beach area. And so what you have is largely the vast majority of Goose Rocks down in that area is now going to wind up being classified as coastal floodplain, which I don't think that's really a surprise to anybody. But what you have is, so within your description of resource protection, it gives you a list of areas that are resource protection. And one of those identified areas is coastal floodplains, okay? So now it's important to know that description is drafted at a time when your coastal floodplains are primarily undeveloped areas, such as your Rachel Carson areas, your salt marsh, the beach, the beach itself. And that's when you look at DEP's Chapter 1000 designations, that's the intent of the resource protection zone. So it's zoning intended to govern uses within the actual resource. So this is the actual marsh itself. This governs uses. So it has things, permitted uses within that are, like your docks. Obviously a dock has to have access. That's an allowable use. Things like, passive recreation, things like that. Those are the types of uses that you have in an RP zone. That's right, undeveloped land. And so we're not required to zone developed areas as resource protection. In fact, there's areas that DEP itself has carved out developed areas from RP locations because they're developed. And so what this amendment really does is it's recognizing that, that we have developed areas that are not currently resource protection, that if we don't address the definition here, by the adoption of the maps, they default become RP. And so what that then means is that now all of a sudden we have, a couple hundred homes in Goose Rocks particularly that become non-conforming uses, right? So all non-conforming uses down there. So that's the use perspective. The second, then further on, because of the development standards for RP, now essentially, well, I would say practically speaking, just about every residential project down there would wind up becoming a site planning board application because of its location within RP. And so, I'm thinking one of this, primarily because that's not the intent of RP. Second, I'm also recognizing, what the administrative burden of that now becomes, in terms of every project, or every, minor majors wind up coming before planning board, in that regard. And, ultimately, we're already going to be looking at these through the floodplain management ordinance to begin with. Because of its location. Well, beyond that, so, you're now going to wind up with not just, what happens in shoreland, but, primarily, the floodplain management ordinance piece, which I'll talk about that separately. What the administrative burden something now that, the code office will be responsible for reviewing. So there, the reason that's driving this is there's a mix here. It's a mix between what that does in terms of administrative process, we're already going to be but also from the thought of that the intent of RP is beyond to zone so and provide now protection for those areas that are undeveloped. What happens in shoreland, and so a good example of where we've already done this is we've specifically already excluded the riverfront zone and the dock square zone from resource protection for the exact same reason. Driving this is because both of those areas are developed between we treat them in terms of administrative general development, but also from if you look at Chapter 1000, it defines what that is. And so this is essentially the same thing. Now, so in a good example, and I've sent this language to DEP, ultimately they have to approve it as well. They have to find that any amendments that affect the shoreland zone, they have to be in agreement with as well. So they have to provide their, their approval of, of that language. What I'm looking to avoid is applying a full designation of general development to all of Goose Rocks. So this is essentially the same thing. That's a bit, now I would say that's a bit overkill, and that's outside of the intent of really what we're trying to accomplish. And I've sent this language to DEP, hence that's why this description is to just specifically exclude parcels which contain upland areas that contain a principal structure and use that are considered developed, as of, July 2023. So it's a recognition of, looking to avoid already existing development, in areas that are going to become RP just by their inclusion into the coastal floodplain.
But will the 30% rule still affect them?
Well, 30% rule is a rule for setback. So the setbacks don't change. Contain upland areas that contain a principal structure and use. The 30% expansion is tied directly to its distance to the actual wetland itself. So it's a recognition of that in and of itself doesn't necessarily change, but you now get into this question of the use, right? Use expansion, becomes a question.
So I like the idea of not blanketly saying Goose Rocks, because I think your description, I have to say the first place I thought of was Langsford Road, and not Goose Rocks. It seems like there you've got an area that's going to be, in the new maps, is going to be all resource protected.
It would also apply to,
there's got to be other
Langsford is a
beyond that.
perfect area beyond that. And this description is, without getting too surgical, in terms of that, essentially describes those types of locations.
Well, I also like that you're getting at the heart of why you don't, why you want to treat it specially, that it really is going to make it difficult to address what the real concerns are for resource-protected areas, and that is for undeveloped areas that are, above and beyond what we do for shoreland zone.
Correct.
So,
Yep.
so I like that about it. Thank you for the
Yep.
clarification.
So that's the intent of that one. The next one that we have are proposed amendments to the land use ordinance regarding accessory apartments. So this one is largely driven by, recent state legislation surrounding around LD 2003. And so we've talked a little bit about this where, recently in the legislature, there was, some significant changes in terms of density. Some of that related to affordable housing, some of that just related to additional dwelling units that could be created. There's a lot of language there that needs to be unpacked. The state gave a deadline of July of this year for towns to have their ordinances into compliance. As I've presented to the selectmen, it's very much a practical difficulty, if not impossibility, to have all of those items addressed in our land use ordinance for the July warrant. Primarily because the rulemaking document, which kind of gets at some of the nuts and bolts of the implementation of this, so the draft of that was only just released a few days ago. So as you can imagine, towns that have town meeting forms of government like ours, this takes us a while. We begin drafting, ordinance amendments in February, for a June warrant. And so to get just the draft of the rulemaking document a couple days ago, doesn't leave you enough time. So the selectmen understand, and they are in agreement with the proposed process, which was we took, what I thought to be the one of the easier ones to address, and that was offering up amendments to the accessory apartments. So with that being said, some of the things that we chose to define in here, some of these are housekeeping items as well, but one, I felt it was important because LD 2003 doesn't address this, but to say that ADUs can't be independently conveyed, that they really are accessory to the principal use, and so ADUs they're not eligible to be condoed or anything of that nature. So we've added that piece in it.
Is that the part where it's sold separately?
Correct.
Thank you.
Then, we did have some language in there where an ADU was a conditional use that could go to planning board. That was if somebody was converting a pre-existing non-conforming structure. So in other words, if I had a detached garage that didn't meet the side setback, it was listed as a conditional use to come before the planning board. Because the legislation very clearly and specifically calls ADUs out as permitted uses, our ordinance was in conflict with that, where we had that listed as a conditional use. So that's, so that portion of it is struck from the ordinance. And that's really what most of those pages are, is we have to show that we've adjusted it in all zones. Our ordinance also had some formulation about, the principal dwelling had to be of a minimum square footage size. Again, LD 2003 doesn't have that. And again, what I focused on was, it's strong language to say that something is permitted. And so you have to be very careful whenever you have things that are permitted to show that you're not being discriminatory. And there are other portions of LD 2003 that make it very clear that that towns should be looking at their ordinances to ensure that they, were not being discriminatory. So to avoid that argument of having a minimum principal unit size, we've eliminated that, language. Now, LD 2003 also specified a minimum square footage size for an ADU, and so we've proposed that language. It's actually pretty small. It's 190 square feet. It's less than the size of a parking space, but but it is possible to have a small. So think tiny house. You know.
Harry Potter, I was thinking.
Right, yeah, the space under the closet, yeah, or under
190
the stairs,
square
yeah.
feet,
But I did leave, within that, the maximum,
Doghouse.
a max size of 800 square feet. Just to be clear that it's still, still accessory too. Some of the things that LD 2003 left in were, ensuring that even though it's kind of overall treated as permitted use, your shoreline zoning rules still apply. And so we had language in here that talked about, you had to have twice a minimum lot area, that all stays in here. So we also are proposing to eliminate some of the language about, occupancy, mandating that occupancy is to the, that it's the owner's primary residence. Again, thinking of this from the lens of, a discriminatory practice, to specify that a specific class of individual has to be the only one who can reside in there is potentially in conflict with that by saying that only the owner can reside, could reside, in these units. Again, looking to avoid, potential legal pitfalls. And so we also had some language in there about, needing to provide, driver's license identification to prove that you were, the resident, and things of that nature. And I can tell you from a practical perspective, that was a very difficult thing to deal with in terms of just permitting. Another piece that was problematic was, in some ways, the ordinance addressed this as a structure and a use, but in other ways it dealt with it almost like a license. And so this idea that an accessory dwelling unit could disappear whenever a property sold was, again, potentially problematic. So that language is also being cleaned up.
So it can be conveyed when the
house sells.
Houses sells.
Right.
The accessory apartment is still
Still in
accessory.
effect goes with it. Yeah, it just can't be separately conveyed. Now, we did reiterate in here that, accessory apartments are not eligible to be operated as short-term rentals. And that's to be consistent with our STR ordinance, so that's the same. Also proposing just to strike some of the language that says that you can't have a home occupation within that. That was some old carryover language from, I think, the 70s, that we still had in there.
So you can't have a home occupation in the accessory apartment?
You could have a home yep.
And your
Under
190
this,
and
yeah,
your
under
190
this
square
proposed
feet.
language would make that permissible, that someone could have a home occupation.
But you still need
Still have to go through the process.
go through the
Yep.
process for a home occupation.
Yeah, still have to go through that process.
And
It just,
that does not run with the land,
that's correct, yeah.
so that has to be permitted if the thing is sold.
Yeah,
It
that's
has
still
to
a-
be
That's still a ZBA, that's a ZBA process. So, although, to be fair, the concept of home occupation, to some extent, is a bit antiquated, especially nowadays where so many folks are, working from home. I mean, on one hand, there's an argument that that's a home occupation, but it's not something that was, I don't think
Envisioned.
was ever envisioned,
It's
at
not
that point.
something where clients come to the home,
Right.
basically.
Yeah, and so as a general rule, we don't consider, someone, working at the kitchen table, their internet business. I don't classify that as a home occupation for zoning purposes, so.
I'm glad to hear that.
So yeah, and then some of the other items that we talked about were clearing up. We also, LD 2003 is also very clear in that you cannot require additional off-street parking, for an ADU. So that's something that's, it's baked into the statute. So we've had to remove that reference, from the ordinance. I will say, just from a practical perspective, the majority of properties that we have in town exceed the minimum parking requirements to begin with. And so, practically speaking, I don't necessarily see that as an issue. But most properties that are doing accessory apartments now have at least 3 parking spaces, which is what you would require. 2 for the primary and 1 for the, for the accessory. Yeah, and I think that's, those are the big changes with that. Then the last one, this is revisions to the land use ordinance regarding private road construction. So, as you all know, we've got a new fire truck coming. And so what this amendment does here, it really doesn't alter, the dimensional requirements, but what I've done here is I've put into a table, the existing dimensions that we have, just to make it a little bit easier for folks to see. We've also taken some of the diagrams that the town commissioned from Acorn Engineering. We've included those now. They're included as part of the ordinance, so that you have the actual diagrams of the cul-de-sac, the hammerhead, and all. We also have an alternate Y hammerhead in there as well, and also just clarified that and really codified your all's practice, in the sense that, and here's the language. It says, in addition, during the course of their review, planning board may consult with the code enforcement officer and the fire chief regarding emergency equipment access requirements for new and expanded existing private roads. So it really is just saying what you already do, but with the advent of this additional information, I felt it was important to actually say that.
In a town where we have so many narrow roads and, grandfathered in hammerheads, and if we have those at all, why are they getting a larger fire truck?
So that is a question better asked of the chief.
Yeah.
Werner, do these changes that you have here for the land use ordinance need to also go into the subregs?
So yes, well, the only thing that really probably wants to go into the subregs is going to be the, the road design pieces of it. And so, so what is in the draft document right now are the turnaround and hammerhead details for a 16-foot traveled width. So I'm waiting. I requested also a design for a 20-foot traveled width, as well. So once I get those will also then be added in to this, since those are the 2 that we typically deal with on the private road. Anything less than that is a code officer review, and we typically deal with either existing 16-foot or 20-foot. So, so that's what I've asked for. And in discussion with the chief, we felt that that it wasn't necessary and would be a bit of an undue burden to attempt to apply that position to a driveway that serves 2 homes. That was a bit of an undue burden to apply that level of access and road requirement for that. So.
Okay.
And so there will be one more coming to you all, and that's going to be I'm proposing this as a complete replacement of the floodplain management ordinance. It's just because it's bit of a mess of a document if you go through the whole strikeout underline process with that, because it was a document originally drafted, originally put together, let's say maybe in the late 80s when that ordinance was, and there have been so many different changes and amendments and updates over the years that weren't necessarily required, but there's a lot of language changes, I guess is a simple way of putting it. And so it's significantly easier, and you're going to wind up with less potential for error with just, and because it's a standalone ordinance, it's administratively, it's very easy to do. You know, we're just replacing one version of the ordinance with an updated version of the ordinance. So, and that's just the floodplain management piece. We get that, so that document comes from, it comes from the state. So the state develops a, out of the office of, you know, the floodplain management folks up at the state level, they're the ones that develop a model ordinance for all communities in the state of Maine. What's important about that is that that model is one that's been vetted by FEMA, you know, so we don't have to go through an individual process with FEMA to have our ordinance approved by them. That's been, for all practical purposes, that's delegated to the state to do. So we get a document from the state that I would say is 90%, 95% complete. And then what we wind up doing is we'll, you know, we have a couple of maybe local nuances that we want to put in there and, you know, and change, and we can do that. But then primarily we're filling in the blanks. You know, we're putting in, you know, we're putting in Kennebunkport where that needs to be put in. You know, we're making sure the map references are correct and, you know, and things of that nature. But, you know, the vast majority of all that is, you know, is boilerplate, you know, that's already been vetted through those other agencies. Then once I've got a draft final, then I also send that back to, you know, back to the folks in Augusta for their, you know, for their blessing. So.
Can I ask you, say something about how you cut in a new version of the floodplain management document? Where it's vis-a-vis someone who's making an application. When is the new one, when is he subject to the new one versus the old one? And what do you do for applications and process?
Sure.
Just
No,
as a practical matter.
yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, you know, if as it comes in process, it's really the ordinance that's in effect at the time the, you know, the application comes in. You know, I mean, that's what you review it. That's what you review it under. You know, but when you're in this, you know, when you're in a transition period, you know,
2 months away from signing, and
we're telling people, you know, like, hey, here's what's coming down the pike. You know, I mean, there's, you know, there's what makes good practical sense, and then there's, you know, kind of your legal obligation. And so, you know, in fact, what we've been doing with folks is that because we've had new flood data, you know, we present that to folks, and, you know, generally speaking, most folks who've been doing, you know, redevelopment have been taking, you know, the smarter path, I would say, and they've been doing their projects based on higher elevations than, you know, than sticking with, you know, the lower or not in floodplain at all. I mean, you know, if you look, Goose Rocks being a perfect example, you know, Goose Rocks is, you know, a good bit of Goose Rocks is designated as a C zone, which is not a flood zone right now.
Yeah.
So.
But as a practical matter, you're saying the emerging documents are, in general, the more stringent, and as people are aware of them, they are.
Yeah. Really, what's more stringent about it is going to be really the elevations. Yeah. You know, so we just reference the map, you know, within the ordinance itself, and then, you know, that's a, you know, I mean, that's kind of a critical piece that you work with. You know, arguably, if you know, and as folks sometimes ask this, well, when's a project grandfathered? You know, like, and FEMA actually speaks to that. You know, they would tell you that. You know, a project is grandfathered once the foundation's in. You know, so they'll see a, you know, foundation being in as kind of that point of no return. You know, but, you know, if you were to have a project underway, let's say you were building a new house, you know, that's in a floodplain, and the map elevations were changing, but you hadn't put the foundation in yet, then there's still time at that point to construct to, the newer elevation, whatever that is.
And insurance companies probably don't worry so much about grandfathering,
Yeah.
so they're gonna look for,
Yeah, it's, well, I mean, so a good example of why, why this is important to know what's coming from the future was, the discussions that we had with, the Glen at Goose Rocks. So right now, I mean, legally, we're looking at, maps that have a different type of, not a different type of flood zone, but the boundaries look different, on the current maps for that area. But it's important for them to know what's coming down the pike, because ultimately what'll happen is that, and we've seen it happen before, property owner builds a house, they go to get flood insurance.
Okay.
Well, now the flood insurance, companies,
today's maps.
well, right, they're looking at the maps in effect.
Yeah.
And they're looking for, that elevation, they're looking to see it on a subdivision plan. And it winds up, it can create quite a mess, if that hasn't been addressed, at this particular stage. So we're really, when we're asking for that, we're really trying to look further down the road and make sure that for those homeowners that may be building adjacent to or close to, that, we've already answered that question. That data's already done, and they can, they can build to the right elevation.
You haven't guaranteed them 200 years from now, but maybe you've helped them over the next
Well,
event horizon.
the idea is that, is that they're able to get out of a construction loan and into a conventional mortgage is really what the practical issue, winds up being. We've had banks that have lended on, on a construction loan, but have really struggled with transitioning to a conventional whenever the flood insurance question wasn't clear or unanswered, so. We've had some properties where they've had debates back and forth, and had some that sat in a construction loan mode, which, has a significantly different interest rate.
And you really
Yeah.
reduced your class of buyers then at that point.
Right.
too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, so that's that.
Okay.
So
Hey, Werner, I want to thank you for bringing us drafts of the proposed changes. We're used to being presented, hey, it's time for you to do a public hearing on
I
this
know.
thing you've never seen before. We
Right.
really like this better, I tell you.
yeah, no, 100%. Yep.
Yeah, it's a lot easier this way.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think our business is done for tonight. I'll take one more motion.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, second.
I think everybody's approved.
Thank you.
Approved.
Approve.
All right,
Okay. Thank you
Bye-bye.
all.
thank you.